get a better understanding of fear. Fear is a very naturally occurring survival skill, but it can go awry and be a justification for bad behavior. Again, it's a survival skill, but at what point does it become something that creates bad behavior? All right, fear is also the absence of understanding. Once you begin to understand something or are willing to understand something, you'll notice that the fear dissipates. So, snakes is an example. All right. It's natural to have a fear of snakes, but once you understand snakes on a deeper level, such as types, disposition, location, viciousness, needs, all that stuff, once you start to understand snakes or spiders, if that's another one for you, you're less likely to be afraid of them. All right. Or you'll know what to do when you see either a particular type of snake or a particular type of spider. The more you know, the less you fear. Okay. Um, let's see here. Let's go into the actual psychology of hate and then why people hate. Once we understand the root of our identity lies in the presence of the absence of fear, we can open up to understand why we make the decisions that we make, which helps us understand our identity. Like, why do we do the things that we do? Well, let's find out. What does identity have to do with composition? Remember, composition as identity is the thesis that a thing is identical to its parts. All right? Identity equals literacy plus identity. If that doesn't make sense to you, I apologize. You can rewind and go back to that. All right? So let's get into understanding I'm going to show you 4 different types of fears, and I'm just pulling from the readings and to kind of help you understand like where you feel your hate might be coming from. And I'm not saying that you have hate. Maybe it's more of the word fear. Maybe you fear something. And so I'm going to use the word fear in the place of hate. So if you have an urge to dislike something, a lot of students I've had in the past go, I don't like the word hate. I'm like, I like that. I don't really like the word either, but it is something that is out there and it's a term that we use to express our feelings. So let's use fear instead. So one of the first fears is the fear of others. And we put others in quotes. Others is people who do not look, act, or whatever like we do. Okay. So hatred is driven by 2 key emotions of love and aggression. Okay. One, love for the in group, like the group that you're in. So when we talk about in group, we mean people who we associate with the same thoughts, feelings, actions, beliefs, that sort of thing. Okay. The group that is favored is the in group. All right. And aggression for the out group. Okay. So when we talk about love for others, we're talking about love for what we know to be, that we understand, versus aggression towards the group that does not seem to work with us, that seems different, dangerous, or a threat to our group. Okay. So when we think about if you have a group and your group, and I say group, it could be people you associate with, maybe it's family, friends, whatever it might be. When you see people who are different from you and your reaction is you don't like them because they're different. They think different. They don't have the same beliefs as you. They don't have the same way of doing things as you. Well, the fear here is that, how do I say this? Let me get to my notes because I feel like that'll help me a little bit. The fear here is that they will change how you see things. They will change you. And there's a fear in that, right? There's a fear of change. There's a fear of difference. And so when we talk about fear of others, ask yourself, what is that? Is your fear that you will have to do things differently as you move forward? And why is that a bad thing? Okay, that's a question to ask for yourself. Why is it a bad thing to try something different? And the question might be, is the change a benefit for all? Or is the change, going to harm people? And it's tough because one person values one thing and another person values another. And what one person sees as harm, another one does not see as harm. And that's the problem. So it's important to recognize both sides of said argument. So when we have a hate towards another person, it's a fear. And what's the fear? That someone's going to force you to change your values. Okay. And it's hard. when you can apply this no matter what side of whatever you're on, you can take your values and apply it to theirs and how yours and their values don't align. So just something to consider as we understand why we might really aggressively disagree with people. Okay. Another type of fear is fear of ourselves. All right. Fear of things, the things people hate about others are the things that they hate within themselves. Right. So I'm trying to think of an example of that. Think of something that you hate about another person. What is that thing? What about that person don't you like? Right? And I say person, it could be a place, it could be a thing. What are the things that you don't like? And then look at yourself and go, is this something that I don't like about myself? And sometimes it's hard to look at that, but it's important to do so. And then once you recognize it, you go, oh, I don't like that person because they're a dick. And then deep down, you're like, well, I guess I'm kind of a dick too. Like, how? How is that the case? Or do you not like someone because they're pushing their values on you? And you're like, how dare you? I have these values that you should have. Oh, right. And so you recognize that. So, in other words, let's just be mindful of how we are potentially hypocritical in the way that we do things. And it happens often, especially when we really hold tight to values. Just be mindful of that. All right. Number 3, we're talking about lack of compassion. So lack of compassion is the antidote to hate. I'm sorry, the antidote to hate is compassion. So when you start to have compassion for others or understanding of said values and where they're coming from, you'll start to recognize like, oh, I guess it's hard for me to hate somebody when I start to understand who they are as a human being. And majority of the time, these people are working out of fear. Okay. And so once you recognize that, you can go, oh, they are afraid. And what are they afraid of? And then you can recognize that and maybe help them in some way to be maybe more understanding and maybe be more compassionate in some way. Number 4, it fills the void. Okay. So joining a group or being a part of, remember the hierarchy, we're talking about belonging. Sometimes we want to feel a part of, and a natural instinct to do that is to partake in whatever a group is doing that you wanted to partake in because you don't want to feel alone. And it depends. Like, so it could be joining a gang, it could be joining a religious group or a hate group or something. I don't know. Joining in another group just so that you don't feel alone. Okay. And so the question to ask yourself is, are you willing to look at your groups, look at the things that you're associating with, and recognize where there might be fear within that group, where there might be a lot of aggression towards the other? Is that healthy? Is that healthy for you? When we talk about hate, hate is not sustainable. It just doesn't. It takes too much energy to hate, and it burns out. And you might be noticing in society, all that hate that was once there starting to dissipate because you can't hold on to it that long. You will recognize that love is sustainable. Love keeps going. Love compounds itself. When you love someone and they love you, it starts to grow. And that's just how it is. And you'll see that within certain groups. When you are in a group full of love and understanding and compassion, it starts to grow on itself. If you are in a group full of hate and, that kind of fear-based thing, you will start to see that it will implode on itself at some point because hate is not sustainable. So whatever that means to you, just recognize that as you move forward and start to interact with more people, especially as you go into college and get into jobs, and who knows what else, whatever kind of groups you join. Okay. Societal and cultural factors and influences. So whether that's political or religious or whatever it might be, maybe it's a sport you're in, who knows? These factors influence what they like to call war culture, right? i.e., this could be violent video games, movies, songs. These are influential in creating hate, all right? And so you'll see that in some songs. Again, in politics, we definitely see that. In society, we're going to talk about this when we talk about, I believe it's maybe week 6, when we talk about how we as a society, we as people need an enemy. We just do. We need something to bring us all together so that we can work against it. This is why religion works in some ways, because there's Satan, and Satan is considered the thing that we all come together as a collective to work against. As we are starting to see more and more people are falling away from religion for many reasons. I myself am not religious, don't go to church, but recognize there is an importance in some ways, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Anyway, and when you don't have that common enemy, then you start to create enemies so that you can have a purpose. And that sounds crazy, but that's just human nature. So, we're taught to hate an enemy. That's just, think of every movie you've ever seen. There's always an enemy, right? There's always the, you know, character that you're supposed to hate and win against. That's just how we are as humans. We always feel that urge to, win, as it were. And so this is just kind of how humanity is, and this is how hate develops. Okay, we will look at someone who's different from us, and then we choose to hate them to validate our point because we need something to focus on to feel better about ourselves. So think about that as you move forward, and where you might see that in society and culture, and how you have certain influences in whatever part of thing you are in. And again, I'm being very vague and very open when I say this, and some of you might be kind of frustrated because it seems very abstract, but apply it to yourself. I'm not going to say this or that specifics because you'll know as you go forward what your cultural influences are, or what are cultural influences around you or people around you. So anyway, okay. So now that we are recognizing and understanding where hate is coming from, let's take a look at Brene Brown's Power of Vulnerability. It is a TED Talk that's here. It's also at the end of the module, but I want you to take a look at it and take some notes. Understanding where vulnerability comes from, the type of people. Anyway, so go through and take some notes as you're watching this, because you will have a little bit of a quiz after. So go ahead and enjoy that, and I'll see you in a little bit.